Good morning, class. My name once again is Dr. Bidemi Badmos. I will continue our lectures on Post 215, titled International Political System and African One. In the last class, we uh, concluded our discussion on study section 2. Today, we are going to proceed with study section 3. And under this particular study section, we will be looking at the the Cold War, the nuclear arms race, and the balance of power. Don't forget, in the last class, we talked about the outbreak of the Second World War, what led to the Second World War, and the aftermath effect of the Second World War, the global political system. So today, we are looking at the Cold War, the nuclear arms race, and the balance of power. If you can still recollect, the last class we briefly looked at how the end of Second World War led to distrust between the two major actors that prosecuted the war, or that led the separate allies to prosecute that particular war. Then we are referring to USA, United States of America, and USSR. They are the two major leaders in that particular war. So the immediate of that war result in distrust over some agreements, and that eventually led to building of armament and weapon of mass destruction. So we are going to look at the Cold War. What do you understand by Cold War? Looking at the concept, we are talking about the war that is not actually involved military confrontation, the war that is not hot, war of ideology. So, in a way, we can define Cold War as intense economic and political competition or struggling among the two major contending forces that prosecuted the Second World War, that is United States of America and USSR, which does not necessarily involve military confrontations. It's not all war that results in military confrontation. Some war are fought ideologically, using propaganda and all sorts of subtle war devices or war methodology. So now we are going to look at the features of Cold War. But before we go into that, there is something very paramount that we need to mention here, that the Cold War was as a result of the breakdown of alliance, particularly between the USSR and the United States, which are the major leader that prosecuted that particular war. There was a breakdown of trust, agreement, and alliance over different issues, particularly over the future of Germany and the fate of other European states that were liberated by USSR. So there is a kind of distrust, particularly as US as at that time. Don't forget that we talk about how US detonated a nuclear bomb that eventually led to the end of that war in the city of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in Japan. So that caught the rest of the war unaware. So, and they felt that United States is actually monopolizing the secret behind nuclear weapon. That also reawakened the curiosity of other world leaders, particularly the USSR, to start pursuing how they are going to develop the weapon of mass destruction. So, what are the features of Cold War? Sorry. When we are talking about the methodology or features of Cold War, we are actually talking about what are the instruments employed by these two key actors in the immediate post Second World War. One of the instruments was propaganda. They used a lot of propaganda against each other, trying to create a larger than life impression of themselves in terms of what they can do, the havoc they can wreak using military weapons. Each of them are carrying out different kind of propaganda, either to damage the reputations or to create a false impression about the level of their arsenal in terms of military equipment and all that. Then we should also talk about the establishment of military base. This was the time that each of these two contending forces, they were trying to establish military base in their friendly or alliance nation or states. So USSR was busy establishing military base in majorly Eastern Europe and other allied states in Asia, while United States was also busy establishing military bases in Western Europe and another continent that belong to his allies. So when you also talk about the restriction of ideology, idea, and people, during this particular era, we're talking about the Cold War era. There was a kind of restriction of movement from USSR restriction of movement of ideas and people from USSR and its ally into United States of America and some of its allies, which means if you are an ally of USSR, it might be difficult for you to secure a visa. Say you are going to study in United States of America or its ally state. It might be difficult because that kind of move can be perceived as a means of spying or carry out espionage on United States of America and its ally states. Vis-a-vis, if you are from United States of America, either you are willing to travel on for vacations or for educational purposes into USSR or its ally state, it might be difficult for you to also secure visa, in the sense that the USSR will perceive such a move as a cynical way of penetrating into their technology and other method of technology, scientific and technology development. That's a kind of, they perceive it as attempt to spy on their intelligence. So we also talk about the ideological contention between capitalism and socialism. If you can recollect, we talk about that. The Second World War led to bifurcation of the war into two ideological groups: the Eastern Bloc and Western Bloc. And these blocks were also divided along economic ideology, where we have the capitalism and socialism. And you know, the capitalism ideology were actually largely embraced and developed by USA and its allies. Why the socialism as an economic ideology and political ideology was celebrated and highly supported by USSR and its allies. So these are the most of the instruments or features that characterize the Cold War era. Then we move on to discuss about the reaction of the two major forces to the Cold War. First, we talk about the reaction of United States of America to the during the Cold War, or to the Cold War activities. The first thing they did was to establish military bases in their allied states. The essence of military base is to register their military presence to prevent the other bloc from infiltrating or penetrating their allied states, which could indirectly or directly jeopardize their interests economically, politically, and militarily in their particular state. So United States of America also established they formed NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organizations, for its allies. It's a kind of organizations that United States formed as a military protective organization for itself and its ally, that any of its ally member that belong to that body will be protected from aggression that may come from other bloc, particularly from the USSR and its allies. They move further to establish Marshall Plan for economic recovery for the West Germany and some other European nations that were liberated, European nations that were liberated and under the leadership of USA, to quickly set up machinery in motion to ensure that those countries they reclaim their lost economic potency, and to set a track for economic development of for those nations. They also establish or they develop the hydrogen bomb in 1952. United States of America developed hydrogen bomb in 1952. That was part of their reaction to actually send a message to their rival, USSR. And they also made attempt to develop other nuclear weapon of mass destruction, like intercontinental ballistic missile and medium range missile, and so on and so forth. A lot of weapons were developed in reactions to the move being made by their competitors, majorly led by USSR. Then we look at the response of the of USSR during Cold War era. USSR also established a similar organization for economic recovery of most Eastern Europe that were liberated by USSR in the Second World War, and that body is called COMCON. That is Council for Mutual Economic Assistance, and that body was established in 1947. They also established WTO, Warsaw Treaty Organization, for defense of socialist states. Don't forget that we talk about USA establishing NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization, for defense of majorly Western state, Western Europe under his leadership. So USSR also responded in that same manner by establishing Warsaw Treaty Organization for defense of mostly socialist states under their control or their leadership. They also go further to develop atomic bomb in 1949 in response to hydrogen bombing developed by USA. Now, we want to critically look at the concept of nuclear arm race. Nuclear arm race. So, we first look at what is arm race. What is arm race? According to leading scholar of arm race or nuclear weapons, Samuel P. Huntington, he defines arm race as a progressive, competitive, peacetime increase in armament by two states or coalitions of states as a result from conflicting purpose or mutual fear. So what Samuel P. Huntington was actually talking about is he described arm race as a progressive competitive peacetime increase in armaments. It is non-stop increase of armament being developed by two contending forces due to their mutual fear or conflicting purposes. As we've discussed earlier, we talk about the breakdown of agreement, alliance, distrust, and the perception that US was monopolizing the secret behind nuclear weapon. All those things actually led to arm race. That is what Samuel P. Huntington was trying to point out here. Then we now talk about the types of arm race. It is not just about peacetime increase in armament. This increase also have categories. The piecemeal increase in armament can be quantitative. That is type of arm race. So we have quantitative in terms of number. The volume of ammunition that are being stockpiled by each of these contending forces. In terms of quantity, also have qualitative arm race. When you talk about the qualitative, you are talking about the quality, the potency, the extent at which all these ammunitions, weapon of mass destruction, nuclear weapon, can cause havoc, the level of destruction that they can cause. So that in that aspect, you are referring to qualitative aspect of arm race or type of arm race. Then we now talk about the consequences of arm race, because there is no how you want to discuss arm race without looking at its consequence. Because these are the period that the world are busy acquiring weapon of mass destruction, developing it, stockpiling it. So that action will surely have consequence on global economy, political system, and the likes. And that's what we'll be looking at under the consequence of arm race. One of the noticeable consequences was at that time it created tension, and that tensions almost led to the outbreak of the Third World War, though it never happened. But that is part of the consequences caused or consequences of arm race as at that time. It resulted or led to tensions, high tensions created by stockpiling, development, and acquisitions of weapons of mass destruction, which almost led to the outbreak of Third World War. We also talk about the diversion of resources meant for economic development into defense or military needs. Because at this period, no country wants to be left out. Every country is aiming high at defending its territory or territorial integrity from external aggression. So this propels every meaningful state in the world to embark on development and stockpiling of weapons of mass destruction. And that was what actually is part of the factor that led to the balkanization of USSR into different sovereign states. Because at a point, the resources that are meant to develop healthcare system, educational system, economic system, and the like were being hugely diverted into military purposes, building into development of weapon of mass destructions, military defense, acquiring military gadget and all that, while leaving other social economic infrastructure unattended to. And that caused a lot of pains in terms of economic breakdown, loss of job, insecurity, civil unrest that eventually led to the balkanizations of USSR. And that also affected other countries that were also interested in stockpiling weapons of mass destruction as at that time, because all resources have been diverted from economic needs to defense and military purposes. It also promotes global militarizations. It promotes global militarization, and the consequence of that was the coup that engulfed most of the developing countries of the world, the African, Asians, and all that. It was the first stage consequences of the arm race that also encourage such high level of coup and counter coup recorded in Africa and Asia. And we now talk about challenges of arm race control, because as all these things were ongoing, we're talking about arm race. The world leader at that time also understand, they identify the dangers of arm race. They know the consequence beyond what we have highlighted here that they could have on the global system. So they made all sorts of efforts to control the arm race, to disarm people, to reduce the stockpiling of ammunition and its development. But there are challenges to that. During those periods, there are different treaties that were signed by the Committee of Nations. But there were challenges to the armed control, which actually made the armed control to record little success as at that time. Part of the challenges confronting armed control or armed race is highlighted here. The number one is the problem of supervisions of disarmament. The problem of supervision of disarmament treaty or agreement among country or between two states. The problem is, don't forget that we said international law is a soft law because it is based on mutual understanding, cooperation, and political will of the country involved, and how much of the military and economic power you control will determine whether some of this international law will be respected by your country or not. So the problem of supervision is a big, it was a huge challenge and still remain a serious challenge up to now. Then the producers of ammunitions were not also willing to stop the development of new weapon and production, because if they do so, they will run out of business, they will lose their job. So it's also a problem. Then there's also a prestige that is attached to the acquisitions and development of weapon of mass destruction, because this send a signal to other country that you have arrived, you have the weapon of mass destruction, that no country should mess up with you. So it's also a huge problem. The prestige, human being by nature, we enjoy prestige and honor. So the productions of high level weapon of mass destruction also bring prestige and honor, which most of these countries do not want to lose as at that time, even up to now. So I think I'll stop here. In our last class, in our next class, we continue with the balance of power. Thank you and all the best.